In Mark 6, 1 through 6, Jesus begins teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath. In the original Greek, it said that the townspeople were astonished. The word used there that's translated to mean astonished is to be defined as to strike with panic. So they were panicked about what Jesus was teaching. You see, Jesus was preaching in his own hometown. He knew these people. When they heard what he was teaching, which we don't actually hear what the topic was, just that this occurred, they heard that, that he was and what he was teaching. He said, "Hey, wait." They said, "Aren't you Joseph's boy? Don't I know your sisters? You're a prophet now? Since when?" They challenged his power and set a stumbling block. Now, a stumbling block means a trap, and this could be literal, but this could also, and was most likely, figurative. And the figurative meaning of to set a stumbling block is to hinder right thinking, meaning to stop someone from having a good or right mindset. The Son of God, stopped by a little self-doubt, which was sourced in from the doubters around him. Welcome to the Occult and the Apocalypse with Kristen, aka Fire Terra Mama, where I tell you about how they took what used to be widely known about God, spirituality, and you, and locked it away. Come with me while I show you what I've learned from science, religion, cultural beliefs, and mythology to turn the occult and the apocalypse into the hidden and the revealed. You see, a lot of time when I'm trying to understand the spiritual layers within the Bible, I'll read it in interlinear form. Its words are a word-to-word translation of the original Hebrew and Greek using with definitions called Strong's Concordance. The sentences aren't pretty, but the meaning can be much more clear. Each word is there by definition or has definitions, and it also shows what roots were put together to make the word. So the original kind of meaning behind the use of the roots together. There are, so I'm going to admit, a lot of linguists and a lot of theologians say you can't use Strong's to retranslate the Bible because you don't understand the syntax of the time, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's accurate. That's totally true. However, I also have to tell you that the linguists and the theologians were educated by the people who are funded by the massively large groups like leaders and religions and wealthy people who have been known to change the Bible and what it says to fuel their own agenda. So I say, if this word has multiple meanings and we weren't there to hear it, why not just look at what they might mean? Maybe that's the word that was picked simply so you could get that double layer. So do you know what happened with Jesus? He couldn't heal anybody, and he moved along. He couldn't be in the appropriate frame of mind to perform miracles, and he was amazed because of the disbelief. A little later, in Mark 6:34 through 36, it says Jesus was teaching and the disciples said to let the people go because it was late and the shops to buy bread would be closing soon, and they didn't have enough. They offered to run to the store, and Jesus says, "Well, how much do we have?" And they said, 5 and 2 fish. Now what happens next is very interesting. Most people get so caught up in the final result, they kind of miss the actions that lead up to the miracle, okay? In verse 39, it goes on to say in the interlinear version of the Bible that Jesus told them to do the following to the crowd. Make recline all of the company in the grass. The word make recline means to lie down or lie back. The word used for company is actually a combination of two words, basically indicating people who are falling down drunk together, or people who are imbibing together, or people who are in a state of elation together, okay? Now, of course, they weren't drinking, but again, it could have been a state of mind or a state of elation. He said, so basically, if you retranslate using those words, he said, have the elated people lay down in the green grass together. He had them recline in the grass in mass, potentially achieving a collectively experiencing some sort of feeling of elation. And the next word that's used is one word. It's a whole sentence, but it's one word that says they sat down. However, this also says that they reclined instead of sat. He then takes the two fishes and the 5 loaves, and he blesses them. And now the word blessed here means to speak well of. So he spoke good things over the food. And, a lot of people do that even now today. We pray over food, right? People across all religions and all cultures pray using their food, okay? And remember, sound and vibration are common themes within creation, okay? So this is a moment of creation for Jesus. So he next breaks the loaves and he gives the disciples, he kept giving them to the disciples, and the 2 fish he divided amongst all of them. All ate and were satisfied. And there was fish and bread remaining after feeding 4,000 or 5,000 people, depending on which version you're reading, okay? Why did Jesus need those people that were going to be fed to be in a specific state of mind, in a specific position? Jesus then sends the disciples into the boat to go on ahead of him. And he says he's basically going to stick around until the rest of the crowd disperses. And then he leaves the crowd and he goes to the mountain to pray. Now the word pray here means to exchange wishes. And the word mountain comes from a root word meaning to rise. So Jesus went alone to a place that allowed him to rise, whether that be physically in physical going up onto a mountain, or whether that be a second layer spiritually becoming enlightened on his own, okay? And he exchanged wishes with the divine. He prayed, exchanged wishes, okay? And while he was there, he saw his friends struggling in the boat, and he began to walk to them. But they saw him walking out on the sea, and they thought he was a ghost. They cried, and he spoke to them and said, per the Interlinear Bible, take courage. Courage here means to be boldened from within. He tells them to find their inner strength. Then he gets into the boat, stops the wind, and exceedingly in abundance they were amazed. Now it goes on to talk a little more about it, but it's more from a narrator's perspective, okay? It's neither Jesus nor the disciples in this moment. It's almost an observation of how much the disciples understood about what they were learning, okay? It goes on to say, not that they understood by the loaves, but had been of them the heart hardened. In this, it's saying that the disciples sort of understood Jesus's abilities and message, but not entirely. The term by the means on the basis of or pertaining to, okay? The word translated to be heart means heart, mind, character, or inner self. The word hardened is defined to figuratively mean completely lacking spiritual perception. So theoretically, this sentence is saying, not for they understood pertaining to the loaves, but they had of them the inner soul completely lacking of spiritual perception. essentially stating that they understood what Jesus was performing miracles, but not how or what place he was performing them from, or what their inner self had to do with it. They were unable to spiritually fully perceive. In fact, Jesus was not the only person that was performing exorcisms and the healings around that time, or even in the same area. There were other healers. There were other Jewish healers. There were Greco-Roman healers. They were all attributed miracles. The only difference is the sources regarding these healers are fewer and further between. And there are some names that have persisted through history. I didn't pull them down because they weren't really pertinent to the story, but they lived in the same time and they did the same things that Jesus was attributed to do. Jesus just had more information persist over a longer period of time, okay? Another miracle pertaining to Jesus was the woman who touched his robe. This is probably my favorite miracle. This is one of two of my favorite miracles. She saw him healing in the streets and she was so ill. She reached out believing if she could just touch his garment, that she would be healed. Jesus didn't even know that she was reaching out. He probably felt the brush against his robe, and it's recorded that he says to her, "Daughter, the faith of you has healed you." Who exactly was Jesus attributing that miracle to? Is it Jesus, or was it the woman and her mindset? In January of 2015, a real person with kind of a fake sounding name was miraculously healed. His name was John Smith, and he was a 14-year-old boy who fell into a frozen lake. He was underwater, they say, for 15 minutes, and they worked on him for an additional 45. They were unsuccessful in bringing him back, and he was perceivably dead. His mother laid over his body crying and praying to God that he not be dead, that God let him come back. Suddenly his heart started again, and he not only survived, but he survived without neurological conditions, regardless of his brain being deprived of oxygen for what they say could be an hour. Okay? It was a miracle powered only by a mother's faith. Now, this is a condition. It's called a syndrome. It's actually called Lazarus syndrome. And it's common enough to have a name amongst doctors, a regulated name. But it's relatively rare. Now, another healer from ancient times was about 500 to 600 years before Jesus. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, also known as the Buddha, or Awakened One. He's said to have been born of royal parents in modern-day Nepal, but he renounced his home life and his possessions to live nomadically to pursue spiritual truths and enlightenment. The miracles attributed to Buddha were mostly what were considered supernatural powers, including psychic abilities, clairaudience, telepathy, past life regressions, things like that. Now, if you caught my About Me episode 2, you'll find out that I've been clairaudient my whole life and showed signs of this as early as 2, as well as other tapped-in abilities. Of course, I personally believe that these are gifts that we're all given at birth, and that you only use them if some sort of social or cultural or religious norm prevents you from really feeling free to use them, essentially blocking them, okay? Now, Buddha's miracles include miraculous healing, teleporting, making copies of himself, and manipulating elements such as wind or water. Many of Buddha's disciples, as well as non-Buddhist hermits and yogis, are said to have achieved the same miracles that he did. Now, although Buddha used these miracles and abilities, he spoke of them as if they were the least important thing about him. To him, the greatest miracle was the miracle of instruction. His teachings were written down in a collection called the Dharma. Now, Dharma was perceived to be, by Buddhists that hold a Hindu view of Dharma, as cosmic law. Buddha's teachings explain that in order to end suffering, Dharma, or right thoughts, understandings, actions, and livelihood should be cultivated. In other words, your mindsets, thoughts, words, intentions, and actions create or rebuke your own suffering. Many Buddhists will see Dharma as the truth, or ultimate reality of the way things really are. One of the miracles attributed to Buddha, he said that it said that he gained enlightenment and was traveling for his first sermon. He needed to cross the Ganges River, and the ferry wanted to charge a fee. He then crossed the Ganges by levitating above the water. Sound familiar? Now, in the year 100, in the year 1000, there was a Hindu miracle of Nambi Ambar Nambi. His father was a priest in a small Ganesha temple in South India. His father had to go on business for the night and requested Nambi do the daily puja for Ganesha. The puja was essentially an offering. Nambi became distraught because, believing Ganesha always consumed the offering for his father, and seeing that his was untouched, he thought he had done something wrong. He started banging his head on the wall in distress when Ganesha spoke to him and said, "Stop, Nambi, stop." And then Ganesha proceeded to eat the offering. Ganesha is said to have taught Nambi everything there was to know about religion all night. When his father returned, Nambi told him of what had happened. Disbelieving, the father went to Ganesha and saw the deity eat the offering and attest to it. Nambi then grows up to become the personal advisor to the king and is said to later be divinely guided to recover some texts and scriptures that were of value and help the king turn them into some sort of hymns, okay? Now, in Sikhism, the founder, Guru Nanak, is said to have traveled around healing and teaching about Ilk Onkar, or one God. He taught that Ilk Onkar dwelled in every one of his creations and constitutes the eternal truth. He came sometime around 1500 years after Christ, and he's believed to be a saint in the Baha'i faith, Hinduism, Tibetan Buddhism, and Islam. Nanak is said to have responded once, "I am telling you truthful words, other than to make people realize that the eternal truth of the divine presence is to be realized in all creation. I have no other miracles to show." That said, he's attributed several miracles. Not only is he attributed several miracles, several of them have to do with water. In one such example, he was visiting with yogis who were jealous of him. So they tried to impress him with their magic. They used magic to dry up the water and challenged Nanak to bring the water back. Nanak instructed a follower to pick up a stick and go to a nearby river. He told him to drag the stick behind him, beginning at the water and moving forward, but never looking back. The follower did as he was told, and the river started to follow him as he dragged the stick on the ground behind him. The follower got about halfway, and beginning to doubt, he looked back at the water, which had been right behind him, and it ceased to flow. When he returned to Nanak, he was asked what happened to the water, and the follower explained that looking back, he had looked back and it had basically stopped. Nanak then told the follower that the point was to show the power of faith and that his self-doubt had stopped him. When he asked the yogis to return the water to where it had come from with their magic, they were unable to. Now, only 1,500 years before that, Jesus had said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move here from there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. He says this in response to a disciple who's asking why they, the disciple, were unable to cast out this one specific demon in a boy. They had been going around casting out demons very successfully, and they were unable to successfully do it with this boy. And Jesus' response was, because you have so little faith. He then goes on to deliver the famous line about the mustard seed. Now, for Islam, the biggest miracle is considered to be the Quran itself. It's said that the Quran confirms and describes multiple scientific laws that were impossible to be known at the time it was written. In fact, many of them we've only just discovered or confirmed recently, okay? It does talk a lot about the miracles of Jesus, and the Quran even goes into miracles from when he was a child, when Jesus was a child. And I believe, my understanding, I've read pieces of it, but not the whole thing. I believe Mary has a chapter of her own, okay? Now, Zoroaster, who we've discussed before, is said to have cured the king's favorite horse of paralysis, and he gained favor from the whole king's family, the whole royal family, because of it. In the Shinto religion of Japan, which some consider to be Japan's native religion, the imperial family reportedly still hold a mirror, a sword, and jewels, which were miraculously given to the Emperor of Japan by his grandmother, the sun goddess. Lord Shiva in Hinduism is said to have resurrected his son who was beheaded. Daniel in the Old Testament reported to have been thrown into a den of hungry lions only to escape or leave in the morning unscathed. Was Daniel a real person in Babylon? A lot of signs actually point to yes, based on the earliest texts that we have describing the book of Daniel, as well as the accuracy regarding to the inner workings of the inner circle around the king of Babylon. Now, in the original interlinear text, we see that the king is commanded that no one pray. The king's henchmen were jealous of Daniel, and they knew that he would not obey that command, and they encouraged the king to decree it. Daniel prays anyways and was placed in the den of the hungry lions. The king, suffering a guilty conscience, couldn't eat or find joy or sleep at all that night. And Daniel prayed. In the morning, the den is opened and Daniel is alive. He says an angel of God came to him and shut up the mouths of the lions because in God's eyes he had done no wrong to God nor to the king. A miracle. In James 4:2, it says, you do not have because you do not ask God. Is simply the request and the belief that God will honor the request, be that it in his will, the simplest way to get a miracle? Do miracles even still really happen? I believe the reason why miracles aren't as prominent today as they were in the ancient world is because organized religions kind of stepped in and started to filter your requests through them. Through most of history, religious beliefs were directly controlled by the wealthy and powerful. The same people who made the laws were the bridge between you and the divine. The people who would stand to lose the most power if the people's relationship with the divine was direct and you could manifest your own reality and ask God directly for help were the same people teaching people what they should believe, okay? Daniel didn't have a rabbi with him. And the disciples went out healing and casting out demons on their own, having just been taught by Jesus how to do it. And the woman with the son in the frozen water, she didn't pay a tithe. She just asked. And she believed that she would be answered. To relate it to a personal life, have you ever been in a bind where it's a week and something has broken and it's unexpected and you're going to have to pay for it and you need $300 to get you there? And finally, in a moment of desperation, you say, God, I need $300. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I need $300, okay, by Monday. And then suddenly an unexpected refund check has shown up in the mail. Or somebody drops groceries anonymously off at your door and now you can put that money towards it. Or a family member calls out of the blue and they hear what's happening and they're like, hey, I can totally help with that. That's no big deal. Our problem is that we've been conditioned to believe that miracles are bigger than that. And also that we're unable to perform them on our own. When does something become a miracle? It is not in the eye of the beholder. If I'm divinely inspired to give a $20 bill to someone who needs it, is God just activating me to be the tool that manifests a miracle for another person? I don't know. I'm going to leave that for you to decide. But from my perspective, we witness tens and maybe even hundreds of miracles each day. We don't have the eyes to see them and the ears to hear them always, but they are there. Thank you for helping me bring the occult and the apocalypse back to the hidden and the revealed. Next week, we're going to talk all about Yahweh and Melchizedek and Jesus and a lot about Yahweh, though. And we're going to pull from all sorts of places to talk about who Yahweh is and also the God in the Bible and where that originally came from. All right, I'll see you then.